contenders. 7 rounds. The road to the Coke Series ends here.
Good evening, race fans, and welcome to Podium Esports coverage of the second race for the 2021 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, live from iRacing's virtual Homestead-Miami Speedway in Homestead, Florida. I'm James Plank, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Josh Lee, Devin Henry, our producer Ryan Bauer, with cameras, as always, provided by the great Dougie Beard. Drivers, this is going to be a little bit of a different race than what we saw out in the desert 1 week ago. Josh Lee, it was tight, it was close quarters, it was hard to gain on anyone. The margins were so slim. Here, you're going to see drivers potentially slide to the left and then slide to the right and slide all over this place because it's a high horsepower, low downforce combo, and you are going to have to manage your equipment, especially if we get a long green flag run.
James, hopefully they're not making that one hop this time and they're staying on the racetrack, because Homestead is one of the 2 intermediates on this calendar. We have Homestead and then we have Texas to round out the season. So for those intermediate strong drivers, they need a good performance here, because we're going to go to Auto Club, which is a big 2-mile track. We're going to go to the Nashville Super Speedway, which you can draw more comparisons to a short track there than you really can an intermediate. And then we have Dover and Darlington before we reach that final intermediate of Texas. So these drivers that are strong in intermediates need to make sure tonight they're putting their best foot forward to try and get a lot of points under their belt.
We'll keep the theme going and crisscross over to the other side, where Devin Henry joins us for the first time on a Contender Series broadcast. And Devin, biggest question, I think, especially from the driver's perspective coming into this week, is after somebody like Nicholas Shelton dominated the race and then came up short in the end, and somebody like Parker Retzlaff was top 4, top 5 all night and then snuck up and got the win. After the way that race at Phoenix ended, do you feel like that's going to affect how some drivers approach Phoenix, whether or not you ended up with a better finish than you should have had or a worse finish than you should have had?
Well, I feel like whenever you open up the year with a less than good result, like, at least half the field has to do, you kind of fall into that situation of, okay, now I feel like I need to bounce back and right foot, let's stomp and just head on that gas pedal. That was terrible, by the way. But anyway, if you're someone who did run well at Phoenix, now you're going to come into Homestead with not just momentum, but that feeling of confidence that, hey, I opened up the season on a high note. Let's keep it going, especially if this is a track where you love to rip the lip. Man, this is somewhere where you can really grab that momentum, continue sliding forward, and you already feel comfortable from a great race last week.
Speaking of crisscrossing, here's a look at the series schedule, which will crisscross the country all the way on the other side of the West Coast. Auto Club Speedway is where we'll head next week, then back east to Nashville Super Speedway, making its debut on an official calendar for the first time. Dover International Speedway, which, who knows, may become Dover Motor Speedway in relatively short order, given the recent acquisition by Speedway Motorsports earlier this week. Darlington Raceway, and then Texas, as Josh said a little bit earlier, to round out this campaign. 7 races to determine who will make it into the 2022 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Josh, let's learn a little bit more about Homestead-Miami Speedway and show you where in the world we are. South of Miami proper, just about on the gateway to US 1 and the Florida Keys, lies this facility that was built amongst the sugarcane fields as a way to kickstart the homestead economy in the wake of Hurricane Andrew.
In just about an hour and a half south of me, I've been to this track for numerous championship races throughout my time as a NASCAR fan, and this track is great. Really provides a lot of great racing. You can race from the bottom to the top. That's true in real life and here in the sim. Also provides just a little bit of challenge for these drivers with that progressive banking. If your car is not working on the inside, go up, try the outside. If it's not working there, try the middle. If it's not working anywhere, well, you're gonna have to go down into pit road by Justin Prince and make some adjustments throughout this race, James.
You are going to have to make some adjustments throughout this race. Never mind the track that you would expect the track to be hot and slick, as I mix up my own words, over the course of tonight's race, which will go for 134 laps, 201 miles, 323 kilometers, pit road speed 50 miles an hour. Your fuel window officially 59 to 62 laps. We've seen drivers go as far as almost 70 in the past and as short as 55. 5 sets of tires in the pits. Briar LaPrade and Donovan Strauss were your winners in the 2 races in the second round of the eNASCAR qualifying iRacing series back in July. That's the big win where you seen Briar throwing a bunch of highlights up on his social media feeds. The victory and him celebrating, that came from this very facility. In sim, the weather is warm. So at least it should be. It's Miami. The default day is not in play. Instead, the in-sim time is November 13th, 2021, this upcoming Saturday at 12:38 p.m. local time as it stands. Air temp 79 degrees, track temp 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds headed to the northeast at 9 miles an hour and humidity of 77%. We are near the coast, so it would make sense then, Devin, that unlike your home of Arizona, it's a little bit humid out here, even in the sim as well.
And I absolutely love that, because even in November, it can still be warm in both places. And when you see the 79-degree air temperature, you're like, yeah, okay, it's not that bad. But once you have that 99-degree track temperature in the middle of the day, it's only going to get worse from here, guys. So you got to make sure that you maintain that right front, but also watch out for that right rear wearing off, because you're already fighting the heat inside the track. You do not want to have to fight that right rear, wanting to really rip that car around in the middle of the corner. So throttle control in the center of the corner on exit especially is going to be vitally important tonight.
I would be inclined to agree on all fronts, and how these drivers can maintain their tires over the course of a long green flag run, I imagine may be more critical here than just about anywhere else we go to in this eNASCAR Contender iRacing series, maybe save for Auto Club or Darlington. But you're in that sort of echelon where if you get a long green flag run, you cannot go all out for more than maybe 5 to 10 laps, or you are going to bleed tenths of a second when we get to lap 45, lap 50, lap 55, lap 60 or so. Coming into tonight, we'll take a quick look at the point standings for you. They are the same as the finishing order from a week ago. So Parker Retzlaff, your leader by 5 over Garrett Lowe. Caden Honeycutt, Colin Keister, Blake Reynolds, your top 5. Then Dylan Alt, Femi Ola, Taylor Hurst, Cody Bias, and Justin Bolton, your top 10. A reminder that the top 20 make it into the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series for 2022 at the end of this campaign. Briar LaPrade, winner here back in July, holds the last transfer spot as it stands. He's 1 point clear of Derek Justice, who finished in 21st. It is time to turn our attention to the starting grid and tell you where your favorite driver will begin the second race of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series for 2021. Parker Retzlaff will start like he means to go on and start just where he finished last week. P1 for him, a 32.650 lap to get in the top spot alongside Caden Honeycutt, 2 drivers who had great showings in Phoenix and will be looking to do the same again down in South Florida. Kyle Pettit will look to rebound after a struggle last week. He'll start 3rd. Cody Bias rolls off from the 4th. Derek Bordeaux and Taylor Hurst, 2 drivers with Coke Series experience, begin 5th and 6th tonight, Josh.
Casey Tucker, Donovan Strauss going to share that 4th row. There's Briar LaPrade showing a little bit of that same speed he had in the Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series, starting inside of row 5 with Colin Bowden to his outside. Alan Bowes and Blake McCandless a little bit shocked at that 12th place qualifying effort, Devin.
Dylan Alt, the Sacramento kid, starts off inside of row number 7 alongside Jordy Lopez. Derek Justice in the 31 starts inside of row 8. Malik Ray will line up in the 16th position. Ryan Mercurio, Colin Keister rounding out those first 9 rows.
Justin Bolton will be looking to get back to the Coke Series after a one-year absence. He'll start on road 10 alongside Liam Brotherton, Femi Olat, and Santiago Tires, both trying to return to action there. Femi competed in 2021. Santi last in 2020, but they're there in 21st and 22nd. Jake Nichols will start in 23rd alongside longtime veteran Brian Schoenberg.
Back from there, you have Nicholas Shelton to the inside of row 13. He had a great speed at Phoenix, wasn't able to get it done in the end. He fell to Parker Retzlaff. We'll see what he can do here at Homestead. Seth DeMerchant, Michael Cozy Jr., next two drivers, both for Logitech G Altis Esports, with Chris Shearburn for Latart Esports to the outside of that 14th row, with Anthony Burrows and Blade Witt running out the top 30 spots.
Vic Matheson for Williams Esports starts off in the next position alongside Blake Reynolds. Ryan Doucette and Christian Pedersen make up row number 17. Brandon McKissick and Zach Nichols, row number 18.
Final drivers on the grid: Daniel Everhart, Brad Davies, Garrett Lowe, and Ashton Crowder, the two drivers who declined to set a qualifying time. For late-breaking stories from pit road, let's go down for the first time this evening to Justin Prince.
Thank you very much, James. And for many drivers, there are plenty of unknowns when it comes to how tonight could fare out. Keep in mind, it's not just a quick turnaround for these competitors this week. There is also no B Opens at Homestead-Miami Speedway. The official races are at Auto Club Speedway. So it's across-the-board confidence levels entering tonight's action for the Contender Series race. Take, for example, Blake McCandless. He had mentioned he felt it was not looking good for his confidence levels, yet he qualified 12th. Other teams were feeling very confident. Some of those drivers are towards the back. In other words, a lot could happen, James, in this one.
And we could see a lot of comers and goers in the second race of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, which lines up with these Class B stock cars, the NASCAR Xfinities that we're racing this evening. We're glad you're with us here on Podium Esports and iRacing social media channels as we go green flag racing, and race number 2 of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series is underway from the virtual Homestead-Miami Speedway. Back across the stripe for the first time, and it's Retzlaff and Honeycutt at the front of the field. And Josh, if I didn't know better, I'd say I'm having a little bit of deja vu because they're right where they were at the end of last week's race, and we're already starting to see these drivers slide the rear ends out just a touch on the second lap of the race.
Two short track aces up at the front. I expected that at Phoenix, being a relatively short track. Not really here. This is Homestead-Miami Speedway. It's an intermediate, and they're still holding strong. I want to point out something. Look in the back of the field towards the mid-pack. Blake McCandless, who started in P12. Remember who the first driver in the qualifying iRacing series to go up to the wall and experiment with that outside line was, James? It was that number 15 of Blake McCandless.
Not a surprise. I figured he'd probably go up top pretty quickly, and so it is. Meanwhile, Caden Honeycutt has managed to take the race lead away from Parker Retzlaff, and Kyle Peddle has snatched second, and Cody Bias has taken third, as Retzlaff will settle back into the fourth position. They're single file amongst the front maybe 5, 6, 7 cars. You have to go back to Briar LaPrade and Colin Bowden fighting for 9th and 10th. That's your first side-by-side battle on track, Devin.
And I'm actually a little surprised that they've evened out this quick. But you can see right here, we're right around 8th on back. It's like a choo-choo train how they are bumper to bumper right now. I'm a little bit concerned early on, typically at this track, about who is going to have the patience to open up the race, because we're 3, almost 4 wide on lap number 1. But these guys really seem to settle out very quick and have that patience, obviously, along 134 laps tonight.
There is time to make moves. There is time for other drivers to make mistakes, and there is time for you to wait and have some patience and then capitalize a little bit later, especially if you're near the front of the field where they immediately have strung themselves out. That's not the case, though, right around LaPrade, though. He's still fighting side by side, this time with Alan Bose, Derek Justice, Blake McCandless there, and there's McCandless dipping down to the inside in his fast Stock Coach Chevy Camaro for Klingerman Sport.
Ooh, and he side drafted the 31 of Justice. I thought they were going to get into a little bit of contact, but McCandless went from the top of the racetrack now down to the bottom as he goes side by side with Justice, trying to move himself a little bit further up the order, but doesn't look like that very inside line right by that white line is going to work for McCandless. You can see the 2 wide right in front of him trying to find an open hole. Can't do it, and staying side by side was Bose and the number 31 of Justice in to his outside. Now McCandless going to go back side by side with Derek Justice, and there's a little bit of a battle starting to develop for P2, and for P3, mind you, as here it comes, Parker Retzlaff right back to the back bumper of Cody Bias, trying to take advantage of that spot and get P3 back.
Whether or not we'll see more battles up there remains to be seen. As it stands, they continue to go single file, and the battle still is back there right around the 10th position. Here comes Colin Keister to the inside. First time he's gone side by side with someone. Derek Justice now the first driver working the high line. We'll see if whether or not McCandless moves up or LaPrade moves up, and survey says McCandless will go low, LaPrade will go high, and LaPrade will hang on to the position for the moment, but Blake McCandless trying to make an early charge, as are some of the other drivers here right at the fringes of the top 10.
And just behind them, Keister in that white and red number 8 has almost banged the doors off at Derek Justice twice in the middle of the corner, and this is a track that can get you in so much trouble. You see where the preferential lane is. You want to be almost 1 car width above that white line. If you get too low, it really scrubs off some speed. You have some bumps down there, so everyone drives the lane up. That is also an easy invitation for everyone to use that lower lane to try to squeeze themselves in, and that can get everyone into trouble. And it's so simple. Look at Justice working the wheel right now. He got booted out by Keister, and now he's a lane outside of where you want to be. And this is forcing him to go into some sort of black hole. Dylan Alt now makes a move in that blue number 40 on the inside.
That's a nice move there from Dylan Alt to get underneath Alan Bose and wrest away that 13th position. Justice will follow suit. He'll come off the top line where he's been for the last few laps and trade places with Malik Ray. Here's a good look at Dylan Alt from his rig in Sacramento, California, as Alt will now try and give chase to Colin Keister, who has cleared this bunch and is trying to run down LaPrade, who is going to lose the spot to Blake McCandless, as will potentially Taylor Hurst as they go through 1 and 2.
McCandless going to look back to the outside. Now, when he does that, James, the tires are going to react a little bit negatively on McCandless's number 15 to running that high line, but he got a great run coming off of turn 2. He was able to get by Taylor Hurst in the 74, so I'm expecting McCandless to start to try and use that outside line, maybe to make passes. As you can see, a little bit of a bottleneck in front of him as he goes right behind Colin Bowden and off of turn 4. Gonna stay in line like Devin mentioned earlier. A bit of a freight train going on right now as everybody runs about a lane up from the bottom, and Caden Honeycutt tries to hold on to this race lead. First side by side, you gotta go all the way to the back as it is a side by side moment between Brotherton and Jake Nichols.
I think for McCandless, it's going to be a matter of going where your competition is not. We've seen him already duck to the inside and to the outside to complete passes. And for more, let's go down to Justin Prince.
And he said several times over before the race, after qualifying, and at the start of this race so far, James, that for Blake McCandless, he wants to run at the top. That's where he likes to run the track. The problem is he feels that will burn up the tires more compared to running towards that line just above the first seam. He's been trying that here and there so far to try and get speed. It's just been the struggle picking up positions. His spotter and crew chief tonight, as again, I should say, has told him he can tell that the car has good speed. It's just about trying to get up there. Other drivers throughout the field, such as Caden Honeycutt and others, are being told keep their tires underneath them and to stick around that bottom line.
Not a bad person to have atop the box if you're Blake McCandless. If you remember, in last year's version of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, we came here to Homestead-Miami Speedway to close out the season, and the winner of that race was, in fact, Isaac Gann. So, not a bad person to learn from if you're Blake McCandless. He continues to work in the 9th spot. Meanwhile, up at the front, Caden Honeycutt pacing this field, but Kyle Peddle has reeled him in ever so slightly. Honeycutt had extended the lead to about 3/4 of a second, and Peddle's worked that back in. It's now maybe a bumper length, if that.
And Peddle, the dead zone Toyota Camry, is really real. I mean, he gained about 3 seconds in the past couple of laps. I was really liking how Caden Honeycutt was commanding the tempo of this race. And then you see even third place, Bias is really starting to gap a little bit on Retzlaff as well. So these top three are starting to make a gap, and then you have to start kind of wondering, okay, am I burning the tires up too much right now? Am I really trying to get on my horse right now and get the heck out of here? But the top three, I'm really curious how they're just light draft here. Maybe the top three are going to burn out a little bit more fuel than the rest of this freight train that we have right here. But I'm curious to see how this evolves. That top three will continue to gain that gap.
It's an interesting one. I don't know if we're really going to get the answer to that, at least for a little while here, because we've got so much time for these drivers to burn off their tires, and you're starting to see some of the degradation. We're back about a second from where we were on lap times when this race started, but there's still a lot more tire wear that's going to take place if we get a long green flag run, and we've only scratched the surface of just how much these tires will fall off. So I think we're going to see more separation, we're going to see this field spread out more, and we're going to see more comers and goers as this run progresses.
And I think if we see a long green flag run here, we're going to see a couple of drivers have to make a bit of weird moves when it comes to strategy, because if we've heard about drivers trying to stretch the fuel to 63, 64 laps, they are going to be almost just barely short. If they can stretch it to 65, they make two pit stops, they make one pit stop, they're good to lap 130. So they might have to try and squeeze in a second pit stop, which is going to lead to some weird times drivers are coming down pit road. But if we do see a yellow flag, basically from here on out, that is going to change the way these drivers come into the pit lane, and it'll basically turn it in to a one green flag stop race. We'll have to see how that's going to develop. We're only on lap 17, James, but we're already talking about tire wear and strategy. That's just the nature of the game here at Homestead-Miami Speedway.
It absolutely is, and I would figure off of past races we've had at Homestead-Miami, traditionally we've seen two strategies develop between whether or not drivers want to try and stop once or try and stop twice. So look for an A strategy and a B strategy to develop if this race progresses and we don't get a lot of yellow flags, as you get a good look at Frostburg, Maryland's Colin Keister, who currently runs in the 9th position, just ahead of Blake McCandless and just behind Colin Bowden for Space Station Gaming.
Keister's been the hard charge with this race so far. Started in P18 and has worked his way into that final spot inside the top 10. And that's where he's actually been able to use a little bit of different lines here and there. Pop to the inside, pop to the outside. And he's been able to make that work enough where when he's able to make the move, he very fastly will pop into that position to get back to the freight train in time. So Keister's really begun to time his moves, keep calm. And even though he's passed a lot of cars, moved his way up, I would not be surprised in the slide if he has still a lot of good right front tire left on there.
How much right front do you have? How much right rear do you have? How much right side tire do you have, period? That will be the biggest question. As a little bit further back, good battle here that I saw at the corner of my eye between Justin Bolton, Jordi Lopez Jr., and Femi Olot. This is 17th, 18th, and 19th. We're going to slide back to in just a little bit. You see him there at the top of your screen. That's your first side-by-side battle. We'll go on board here with Lopez as he's got company to his inside in the form of Liam Brotherton. That's going to keep him pinned in the middle of the racetrack. Brotherton will get down to the bottom, complete the pass, and move up into the 19th position.
Of course, Femi Olot, one of the drivers from the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series in the past year, trying to work his way back to that point. Bordeaux is going to put Retzlaff down onto the cusp of P5. So the number 4 machine going to continue to, or the 04, excuse me, going to continue to move his way up through the field. And we go on board now with Jordi Lopez Jr. as he continues to look north in front of him, James, and currently running in P20, trying to find his way around Liam Brotherton. He's got Nicholas Shelton right behind him, who's trying to get a better run off of Phoenix. But something I was just thinking about that I think we should bring up here, James, is the fact that this will be the first round where we're going to have to start talking about drop weeks, because of course they get one drop out of the entire season. They can drop their worst result, and then the points off of the other 6 are going to be the points that are counted. So off of these first 2 races is when we're really going to be starting to talk about drop weeks, because these drivers are essentially going to have one race where they can perform relatively off of their normal pace, but then the rest of them are going to need to be great, so they don't have to use another drop week on top of that.
it'll be tricky for these drivers to maintain a correct mind frame of how many points they have, because the iRacing points calculator on the official site doesn't account for the drops until the end of the season. So drivers may be well north of the cut line, but may have a terrible drop, and somebody else may have a drop of, say, 15th or 20th, which would be really good. You may end up with some wild point movements at the end of the season, and you have to really be cognizant of where you are, where you stand, and where the people around you would be dropping from at season's end. Yes, you get one mulligan, but we'll see how it goes as we go on board with Casey Tucker, who has decided to jump up to the top line to see if he can gain a little bit of track position. He's already cleared Blake McCandless and now is trying to work after Colin Bowden, who seems to have been able to defend just about everybody, as Bowden nearly turned himself across the nose of Tucker off the exit of 2. He'll stay to the inside. Tucker looks likely to complete this pass, maybe out of turn 4.
And we know McCandless wants to run the wall, and he's right now on the inside of Casey Tucker in that black number 15 machine, and he's probably watching going, man, I want to get up. Man, I want to get up there. But he's had the patience so far. McCandless sticks to that inside lane, and Tucker's still the only guy out front up ripping the lift. So 28 car continues to find some speed here to continue to work on Bowden. Just can't quite get to that quarter panel and can't even cross him back over. The outside lane of the tire wear just doesn't seem to be effective enough yet to continue making moves. He made a couple of good spots there, but it's just not quite enough. Even there, you see McCandless try to peek to that right rear quarter panel, and just nothing there yet.
Whether or not this changes towards the end of a green flag run, I don't know yet, but it is a bit of a surprise how everybody's been glued to the bottom. It's not what we've seen in prior races here, whether or not it's the Contender Series or the qualifying series, is now McCandless is going to try and use that outside lane, but I don't know how much he's going to get out of it, because Taylor Hurst already got to his inside, and he may end up giving up one spot, maybe 2 here, if he's not careful.
McCandless going to go right back to the outside. He does need to watch those drivers under him, James, but right now, it looks like especially off of turn 2, the outside line seems to be the preferred line. Off of turn 4, McCandless doesn't get as good of a run as he gets off of turn 2. When he exits turn 2, he basically slingshots himself down the back straightaway. Wondering if that's a difference in how he's running both of the corners, just that turn 2 might be having a little bit of better effects on that outside line, but McCandless seems to get just a little bit of a better run off that second corner. And as we go on board with Malik Ray, huge bottleneck in front of him as Derek Justice tried to move to the bottom of the racetrack. He had Malik Ray to his inside, both of them trying to get by Alan Bowes as we stay on board with Malik Ray in that Sim Seats number 1 Ford Mustang. He'll go side by side with Derek Justice once again, both of them still behind Alan Bowes, and here comes Justin Bolton to move himself into the conversation.
The problem is that that inside line still is all too powerful for the outside line to maintain any sort of momentum unless someone ahead of you checks up and gets off the gas on corner exit. All things even, you want to be on the bottom right now, and as Derek Justice stays up there, he's trying to pinch Justin Bolton down and take air off his nose, but all I think he's going to be able to do is maintain track position at best.
And Justin Prince is reporting that Casey Tucker, his tires did not like moving to that outside lane. Blake McCandless is now falling outside the top 10 after he flirted with the outside lane. And with the now 103-degree track temperature, it's not getting any easier out there. And if I'm anyone else, I'm thinking, I'm watching this and going, I don't think I want to go up there right now.
Let's get Justin Prince in for more stories from pit road in the middle of this green flag run.
And as Devin Henry was alluding to with some of the drivers, they are starting to report a bit of issues with the tires after trying that top lane, such as Tucker, such as McCandless a little bit as well over the radio. Some of the drivers did mention me prior to tonight's race that they were expecting that to become a factor later on in the run, especially with the spotter for Tucker saying he feels like it doesn't matter as much the tire wear later on in the run. But keep this in mind, a majority of the field has been reporting very tight conditions too, in part with the wind conditions and how it's blowing towards the banking in turns 1 and 2, but also just struggling to get rotation at both ends of the racetrack, James.
Struggling to get the rear of the car to cooperate. That's always the challenge here. It's part of the tire management that we have touched on extensively throughout this green flag run. As Casey Tucker returns to the high line to try and clear Dylan All, but All's just going to stay down at the bottom. He's managed to jump around McCandless and might just get the spot from Tucker too and maintain a place in the top 10.
And James, as they run right now, I want to go back to what Devin said about the track temp, because we are crossing through about 1 p.m. in sim time. So if the temperature drops, it's not going to be by multiple degrees. It might be down to 102. It might go up to 104, 105 as we go into the middle of the afternoon. But here in the sim, especially right now, we're not going to have an afternoon rainstorm to cool anything down here in South Florida. It's either going to continue to get hotter, stay exactly the same, or maybe drop a couple of degrees towards the end of the race, but I would not expect the temperature to change basically at all. I'd be planning on 103, and we're about halfway through this tire and fuel run. They need to stretch to lap 67 to get all the way to the end of the race on one stop, but they would have to stretch to lap 67 not in just one run, but in two. A very tall order, not even sure if it's possible. We might see one driver or two go for it, like we saw two drivers go off the normal strategy in Phoenix, but if not, they're either going to be hoping for a caution or trying to plan a second stop sometime in that final fuel run.
Two things I can tell you. The first is that the track temperature has climbed 4 degrees to 103 degrees Fahrenheit, so we're seeing that number already shoot up. And the track's getting even hotter than it already was, as you get a good look at Chris Sherburne for Letarte Esports. The second thing I can tell you is that Derek Justice just smacked the wall running the high line in the middle of 1 and 2 last time by. He's got more right side damage than just about anybody else in this field and is beginning to slip from the back half of the top 20, currently running in 18th and just trying to hang on to the outside of Jordy Lopez, the middle of this pack. So trouble for Derek Justice early on, not what he needs if the driver out of Kentucky wants to make a return to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series in 2022.
And once this pit window opens, James, I feel like I want to go and get my tires. I don't know if it is worth at this point, with the outside lane not moving at all, of staying out unless you're banking on a caution and trying to go the way on fuel. I feel like that once one person comes in for 4 fresh Goodyear tires, you want to come in and stay on pace with that guy. Because I don't want to fall too far back and get caught a lap down in this race, because the way that the start of Phoenix looked and the way that the start of this race looks, I don't know how many cautions you're going to get a mulligan, right? So obviously all these guys have spent hours researching, making their setup, and getting this car ready for this race. But the way that I see no outside lane going right now, I'm probably going to start taking a little bit more conservative, honestly.
Or you could take a gamble, take a risk, because we need to talk about the fact that if you're going on the two-stop strategy that Josh talked about a little bit earlier, as we get a good look at the qualifying series champion, Donovan Strauss, running for Space Station Gaming and currently holding the 6th position. But if you're going to two-stop this race, your window to pit opens up in the next 4 or 5 laps or so, and you really want to try and nail the 1 or 2 lap window that would split this up evenly. You don't want to go too long or too short on any of these runs. So for those who would be following the standard strategy, it would be either lap 41 or 42, followed by lap 83 or 84, 82, 34, somewhere in that range, and then you finish it off at 134. But anywhere from 41 to 42 laps a stint. So we should see some drivers come in over the next 5 laps, and those drivers will both tell you, A, who believes in the B strategy and will watch their pace to see, B, whether or not it compares nicely to the one-stop strategy we think the majority of drivers are going to try and go for.
And here comes Derek Justice, first driver in. This is about 3 laps sooner than we were expecting anybody to come and hit pit road. We're going to see if this is going to be monkey see, monkey do, and we're going to see more drivers start to work their way down into the pit lane. At the lead, Caden Honeycutt still trying to hold off Cody Bias. None of the leaders are going to even tempt pit road. And doesn't look like anybody else is really going to be touching pit road just yet. So Justice is going to short pit. We saw different strategies in the last race, James. I do not think the one stop is going to work here with the way the tires wear. Making it 67 laps is a feat in and of itself. if you try and stretch your fuel, stretch your tires that far. With drivers then having about 20 lap older tires in that final stint for the drivers making the 2-stop, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. So the 1-stop doesn't seem to be the strategy here. I think they're going to need to all go for 2 stops and then try and make stuff up on the racetrack or in the pit lane by trying to maybe undercut, overcut.
Brian Schoenberg has also come down pit road for service early, so he and Derek Justice in arguably before the window is open. Meanwhile, leaders are nose to tail for first and second. Here comes Cody Bias to the inside of Caden Honeycutt to try and take away the race lead and give us another leader at Homestead-Miami Speedway. But also of note, window is opening for the 2-stoppers this time by. So who comes in and makes a stop and makes this a 2-stop race? Devin Henry. Let's watch and find out over the next laps to see what the answer to that question might be.
And I think that question, when you get an answer, I mean, Derek Justice is blowing by the entire field right now. The difference of speed on these fresh tires is downright ridiculous as he's running about 34 ones. Everyone else is running about 35 threes at the fastest. Absolutely insane. This 31 car is just saying sayonara, but his issue is he has to use the outside line to pass everyone. And as we all know, that's going to change up what you do with the tire wear. The battle for the lead heats on up. Bias got the move done. Back to the inside comes Caden Honeycutt for the lead. Bias way on the outside now looking to fight back.
Bias is going to roll the momentum up top. Meanwhile, we're starting to see some drivers come in. Daniel Everhart has decided to make the move down to pit road. He'll be 2-stopping this race if standard strategy holds. Honeycutt and Bias continuing to fight for the race lead. Will anybody else follow suit with Everhart, or is Everhart potentially going to be the Pied Piper so far as the 2-stoppers go? We'll wait and see who decides to come down pit road, hearing that Femi Olot is going to make a stop, and we'll see if we can get Justin Prince in a little bit here to give us some reports from pit road as these cars come down and get service for the first time.
Femi Olot, of course, comes in and doesn't look like anybody else getting that pit road bug just yet, so they're pitting a little bit later here, James. I don't think we're going to see anybody stretch it much farther. I think now that Cody Bias is in second, he lost the lead to Caden Honeycutt. This could be a good opportunity for him to come in. And as I say that, he does the exact opposite and stays out on the racetrack. Here comes Blake McCandless. He's going to work his way into the pit lane, but still the majority of the field staying out on the racetrack. Jake Matheson is going to come into the pit lane. Everybody else stays on the racetrack. So we have now 5, make that 6 drivers who have finished their pit stop for this cycle. 2 of them, Justice and Schoenberg, pitting a little bit early. Olot, Everhart, Matheson, and McCandless have since come down into the pit lane. Another pass of the start-finish line. Justice goes by to unlap himself, and Colin Keister comes into the pit lane along with Justin Bolton coming down. It looks like Blade Witt's also trying to come down. So is Garrett Love. A late choice for Garrett Lowe to work his way into the pit lane, but he gets down. Ashton Crowder also working his way in.
Let's go down to Justin Prince for stories from pit road.
Lots of drivers currently completed their service, but there's also been a lot of debate on how to play the strategy out at this point to keep in mind, James, especially with some of the front runners. There's been a lot of debate on whether to run it out dry or come on in. One of the drivers peeling on in now is Cody Bias. His team feeling very happy so far. Third conversation about the battle for the race lead. It's Caden. You know how bad he wants it. As long as you're in the lead for lap 134, that's all that matters. So they're now coming in for their service, fairly happy with the balance of that race car currently for the number 27 machine. Amongst the drivers completed their service already, Blake McCandless had minimal adjustments to his machine. He's expecting things to spread out more so this run, however. So keep that in mind. There was some small adjustments to the tape side of things for the number 15 machine, as well as more scramble their way in.
Justin, any word on Cody Bias, Brian Mercurio, or some of the drivers coming in, including your race leader, Caden Honeycutt?
Just mentioned when it came to Bias how they were feeling in regards to that side of things. But regards to drivers like Kyle Peddle and company, those competitors have been trying to play the patience game, knowing how difficult this race is. Kyle Peddle has been actually asking his spotter and crew chief tonight, Michael Guerrilla, to help him keep calm over the radio. He had a bit of a mistake, though, in his pit entry, had to back up a split second. That will cost him some time on the racetrack. More drivers making their way in and out of the pit stalls now. Several different drivers currently making small adjustments. That's in the majority of what some of these calls are currently, James, with how the race is played out early.
Everybody coming in now. It's a madhouse. It's Donovan Strauss, Malik Ray, Brian LaPrade. I'm losing track of how many drivers are coming in for service at this point. Devin Henry, because it seems like where maybe 3-4 laps ago, we might have had maybe 2 or 3 drivers stopping early. No, we've got a solid 2/3 of the field in now, and Taylor Hurst is going to come in from the race lead and nearly loop it on entry, and he just about made it in, as did Alan Bose, who was drifting his way fast and furious into the boxes.
These guys are testing their luck going on to pit road, and now with this cycle starting to reform, Casey Tucker's staying out, and you just see everyone blowing the doors off of him on the inside lane. Tucker's is still out there. Jake Nichols, Chris Shearburn, Seth the Merchant. All these guys are just trying to hold on. The scariest part when you are one of the last guys to come down pit road is if someone tries to pass you on the inside, you get booted back outside. He can't even come down onto pit road right now. There's too many cars on the inside lane if he wanted to, but Tucker just sees everybody flying by right now. I don't know how much longer he can go without getting onto pit road without losing substantial time.
Jake Nichols comes in, and now I think we've hit the point where most of the field has come in, and unless you feel like you've got incredible pace, Josh Lee, if you haven't come in already, you're probably staying out until 67 and trying to one-stop this race.
And at this point, I'm not seeing a one-stop strategy be really that viable. Here comes Jake Nichols out of the pit lane. Still waiting on a couple more drivers. Tucker, Shearburn, Merchant, Davies to come in. I think some drivers are going to try the one stop. Maybe any of these 4 drivers are going to try it, but at some point, Justice will catch up because it is going to be relatively brand new tires for Justice. I say relatively because his stint's about 12 laps on these tires, but 12 laps versus 51 laps for the top 4 right now, that is pretty substantial. But Justice is in front of Blake McCandless. McCandless is on 6-lap older tires. Then it's Cody Bias, who is on 8-lap older tires. Then it's Honeycutt, who is on about 9-lap older tires. So everybody in the provisional top of the leaderboard, once we cycle through with the first round of green flag pit stops for all drivers, looking a little bit wonky right now and wondering if 6 laps is going to be enough for Blake McCandless to have an advantage over Derek Justice, or if that short pit might have been what gave Derek Justice the lead of this race for a long period of time, maybe over this next fuel run.
There goes Cody Bias to the inside of Blake McCandless. Caden Honeycutt will follow suit. You would assume McCandless will try and tuck in behind. That is your Delta leader battle as it stands. Amongst the drivers who have already come in for service, you would figure they'll probably catch Derek Justice in a handful of laps. Justice running about 0.7 of a second slower than this pack of leaders that you see on your screen. So Justice will fall to them. You would think at some point here, maybe the next, call it 10-15 laps or so, and then you just have to worry about where the 4 drivers come out who have stayed out on the racetrack. Tucker, Shearburn, and DeMerchant and Davies, we would assume, are going to try and go all the way to lap 67 and make this a one-stop race. It's a viable strategy, but at this point, if you're already out there, you have to stay out there and hope that this plays out in your favor.
Yeah, you have completely made your bet at the very least for this pit cycle. Casey Tucker is running laps that are almost a full 2 seconds slower than Cody Bias and Caden Honeycutt right now. So for Tucker, okay, you've decided to run this strategy, and now you just have to play it out. This is going to lose substantial time as the race goes on and as this run goes on, because even though he's going to get back onto pit road, get those fresh tires, he's going to be so substantially behind where he was when the cycle began that he might not be able to get back to it before the next set of pitting begins if we do not get a caution. So at this point, we're just banking on that happening, or banking that the next pit cycle works out for you again. But again, Caden Honeycutt now feisty on the rear bumper, the 27 of Bias. Honeycutt to the inside to retake what might just be the lead here in about 10 laps.
Look at the man out of Aledo, Texas, making moves and charging towards the front. He clears. Cody Bias takes over what is now the 6th position, what will be, once this cycles all the way through, the race lead, as Honeycutt goes to just the edge of the top 5 as it stands. We'll wait and see how long it is before they get to Derek Justice. Justice is now only clear by 2 seconds and losing somewhere in the ballpark of maybe a full second or so per lap. It's a pretty significant drop off, even though he's only got 9 lap older tires than some of the drivers in this lead pack behind him. But that's how much tire wear matters here at Homestead-Miami. We will beat that point in over and over and over and over again, because it is everything here if you don't have cautions to break up runs.
And where we stand right now, of course, for everybody in the field, we believe Casey Tucker, Chris Shearburn, Seth Merchant, and Brad Davies might be trying to stretch it to a one-stop strategy. So they're going to pit on lap 67 and try to make it all the way to the checkered flag without pitting again. We think for everybody else in this field, they are essentially looking at pitting right around lap 82, which will then take them to the end of the race. So we'll see how these strategies are going to continue, because right now, especially with the field spreading its way out, we don't have a lot of drivers close in with each other. We have a couple of battles here and there, but definitely not the freight train we saw at the beginning of this race. So right now, we're just kind of in a lull at the moment, waiting on the next round of pit stops to happen. But this is a great opportunity for a couple of these drivers to make up a bit of time on the racetrack with some fresher tires over the rest of the field.
Good look off the back of Derek Justice's car. The 31 Toyota Supra in trouble so far as his bid for the race lead goes. Here goes Honeycutt to the inside, and he will get around Justice with ease to move up into the 4th spot. And we're just waiting on now 2 drivers who are yet to come down pit road. Casey Tucker and Chris Shearburn now almost on 60 lap old tires. Everybody else has already come in for service.
Yeah, and as we continue to go along here, you see guys like Justice, who was the first guy to come down pit road, now running somewhat substantially slower laps than the rest of the field. And now off goes the next car, Renzlap. Had a great run last time around, and we saw back at Phoenix, guys, how Renzlap just kind of jumped to the opening part of that race, or the ending, the closing part of that race, to go and pick up that victory. Well, and when you look back to the original race here at Homestead-Miami Speedway, even though that was a long time ago on different configuration back in 1995, Dale Jarrett was the winner of the inaugural NASCAR race here at Homestead-Miami Speedway, leading a whopping 2 laps. So just because we have a guy like Caden Honeycutt running really well right now and potentially getting back to the lead here momentarily, doesn't mean that strategy is not going to completely flip this race on its head, just like we saw last week. So it all starts right now, though, on this second part of your pit cycle. What do you do with the momentum that you have? What do you do after this first pit cycle to get yourself up front? And are you going to be that guy to only lead 2 laps and maybe win this race like Dale Jarrett did in the Xfinity Series in '95?
There's a real-life reference, if you ever needed one, throwing it all the way back some 25-plus years. Good job, historian Devin Henry. Didn't know you had that particular trick in your sleeve for this track of all places. I know you've got it for Phoenix, but nice to see that that ability transcends coasts as well. As Honeycutt has made his way to the race lead, Chris Shearburn just came down pit road, did a 60-lap run. So nobody was able to make it all the way to 67. That means that the drivers who stayed out will have to come in and pit again. And that also suggests to me that they are going to look for a yellow somewhere in between lap 85 and lap 100. That is their shot at this point. If you have played that strategy, you're going to wait. You're going to try and come in after everybody else, and you're going to hope that the caution falls at the right time to where you can pit and save your track position by pitting under yellow as opposed to losing all of it under green.
James, usually I would say hoping for a caution might not be the best run here. I do think hoping for a caution can be a viable strategy here, and I only say that because at the beginning of this race, when everybody was stacked up, and you can still see it in the battles running throughout the racetrack now, they are barely giving space. They are running very close together, almost banging doors. We saw it when the green flag dropped. We're still seeing a little bit in the side-by-side battles here. So I think eventually we are going to end up seeing a bit of side-by-side bumping, a little bit of a wreck at some point to lead to a yellow flag. Not a multi-car pileup, maybe one driver into the wall spins down into the apron, but I do think we're going to see at least one caution So that if it falls in that window you were talking about, that could be the gift for a lot of drivers to work their way back up through the field. But right now, for the drivers that just came down into the pit lane, they are currently 36th, 37th, 38th, and 40th on the racetrack. Definitely not working out for them just yet.
Good look at Manchester, Tennessee's Brian LaPrade aboard his rig, trying to defend his victory in the qualifying series with the Class C trucks from a few months ago in the summer, back in July. He currently hangs out a little bit further back than he'd like, 17th as it stands, but not too many complaints, I think, at this stage for the Lockdown Racing driver. He won't mind, because there's plenty of time to make this up as we continue to watch battles all over the racetrack. There's a good look at Parker Retzlaff trying to fold off Cody Bias, Colin Keister. Another good battle further back between Derek Bordeaux, Derek Justice, Taylor Hurst, Malik Gray, as everybody begins to clear that 31 Toyota Supra of Derek Justice out of Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Struggling for pace at the moment. The question is, how far is he going to fall over the course of this green flag run?
And guys, we have some breaking news from the track. The surface is all the way down to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're starting to get back down. Instead of, we started at 99, we were at 103, so we're beginning to slide on down. And some other guys sliding down is Liam Brotherton trying to make the move on Blake Reynolds for 22nd. A few different guys have started to migrate up to the top, higher lane of the track. I saw Blade Witt up there. Daniel Everhart has made the move to the top a little bit, but most everyone ends up sliding back down. And I feel like a lot of drivers came into this race thinking that the high line was going to have that speed, but then you had to worry about the tire wear. I'm almost wondering if guys want to hit that top lane earlier in the run on fresher tires and then migrate back down to the bottom as we get closer to changing tires again, as Witt now makes the move on the high side against Garrett Lowe. Might we see more guys on the high side once we go by this next pit cycle and guys want to use the high line sooner rather than later like we saw in that first cycle?
I think there's a very, very valid point there that you make, Devin, in that if you're going to try and go up top, you want to do it when you still have some sort of fresh tires on your car. Once they wear off, I think you do want to get back down to the bottom, but I could see the top being viable for somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 10 laps right after you come down pit road for service. And I'm keeping an eye on the field to see if anyone's trying to do that now. 20 laps into the run for most people.
And Derek Justice, who is 30 laps into this run, down into P14. So his tires are pretty much gone. Wondering if he's going to try and stretch it to have fresher tires towards the end to make this a bit of a longer run and basically late pit on this next cycle of green flag stops, or if he's going to take the alternate route and continue to pit early and then have some worn tires towards the end of the race and closer to the checkered flag. Interesting to see how Justice's strategy is going to continue to work out. But here's the driver on the tail end of the top 5 right now, Taylor Hurst. He was one of the last drivers to pit under the 2-stop strategy. So Hurst currently is on 21 lap old tires, and you can see the lean as he goes into the corner here of turn number 1. He's got Alan Bowes behind him, who we just saw a couple of moments ago. He's also on 21 lap old tires. Colin Bowden is on 21 lap old tires, and Jake Nichols as well is on 21 lap old tires, but he's down in P30. So a couple of drivers who pitted at the tail end of the main strategy for the majority of the field, James, are still having a bit of success and are on a couple lap fresher tires than the drivers at the front. But the difference between the drivers who are trying to make the one-stop strategy work is they're up close to the top 10.
There was a considerable amount of lean there off this rig of the fellow Winston-Salem, North Carolina native Taylor Hurst there, definitely getting into it as he tries to get underneath what would be potentially the 9th position as Derek Bordeaux begins to work to the inside of Blake McCandless. He's going to bring Alan Bowes with him. These two on fresher tires than McCandless, as is T-Dog Taylor Hurst behind him, as is Malik Gray, as is well pretty much everybody. McCandless came in a handful of laps before most of these drivers, so he's just trying to maintain his track position for the moment, but as it stands, still in the top 10, at least for now.
Yeah, and everyone's still trying to use some of those different lines. To see McCandless in that fast number 15 up against the wall, and still doesn't feel like it's really going anywhere. On board with Olot here in the Interstate Batteries machine, and now that everyone is beginning to spread out a little bit more, I'm interested to see how these guys decide to strategize the rest of the cycle. But I want to go back to about the 33rd position right now. The only native of Florida in this race, Jupiter, Florida. You have Brandon McKissick. It's a virtual home race, if you will. And I know that he definitely wants to be performing a little bit better than right outside the top 30, but I know 120 miles north isn't necessarily, you know, the same kind of spot, but nonetheless, this is the home racetrack here, the only Floridian in the Contender Series this year. And while I know that he wants to do a little bit better here at Homestead-Miami, it's still cool to have him out here, be able to race at your home track in a series like this.
Well, in fairness, we can stretch the definition of home a little bit. We saw it happen for Checo in the Formula One race a little bit earlier in the week, going from Guadalajara to Mexico City. That's not exactly a short drive, but still there. So I call it a home race for Brandon McKissick. And McKissick, you're right, I think would love a little bit more pace, but he's got some of the fresher tires in the field as we continue to watch this battle right around Blake McCandless. It's Malik Ray and Colin Bowden going to war with McCandless at this time. And the question will be, how far does McCandless fall now? He's back to 13th after starting in 12th.
We go on board with Colin Bowden, who's trying to work his way past Malik Ray, trying to work his way past Taylor Hurst, and it looks like we have Derek Bordeaux trying to go up to the outside of the racetrack. Through this run, we haven't seen anybody really experiment with the top line here, James. And we see a couple towards the back. I look back at Michael Cozy Jr., Blade Witt's running the outside line. But up front, looks like majority of the drivers just trying to take this middle run of the two-stop strategy as just the one to get through. The one where they want to make sure those tires are conserved a little bit, just so when they get closer to the end of this run, they can pit a little bit later, maybe be on fresh tires for the end of the race.
Speaking of pit stops and strategy, for updates on what the leaders are up to on that front, let's go down to Justin Prince.
There's a lot of discussion in that regard, James, and for a lot of the teams, keep in mind, it's not fully concrete. For some of the competitors, especially up towards the front, it's as simple as, how are we going to react to our competitors on the racetrack? For others, though, keep in mind, they are starting to notice little things to have to adjust to. They have reported, including drivers like Malik Ray, like Briar Pratt, like McCandless, that the track has been getting tighter as the rubber is built up. For drivers like Caden Honeycutt, he just recently reported he's been starting to lose a little bit of drive off on the corners. So keep that in mind. Also, Derek Justice has just also peeled on in. We are inside the window to make it to the unknown gas from here, James.
We're inside the window. Derek Justice is the first driver to come down pit road. Donovan Strauss battling here with Colin Keister. And as the leaders cross the start-finish line, we cross the halfway point of tonight's race, which means it is now time to bring you our iRacing Midway Race Break, which as always is brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport, virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually in Australian supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the World of Outlaws, and more. Caden Honeycutt, your leader, with 77 of 134 laps complete in the second race for the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from the virtual Homestead-Miami Speedway. Parker Retzlaff rides in the second spot. Third belongs to Cody Bias. Colin Keister holds fourth, and Donovan Strauss completes the top five at this time. Kyle Peddle is in the sixth position. Seventh belongs to Alan Bose. Dylan Ault races in eighth at this time. Ninth is where you'll find Taylor Hurst. And Colin Bowden completes the top 10, Josh Lee.
Malik Ray sits P11 with Derek Bordeaux P12, Blake McCandless, Briar LaPrade, and Santiago Tierez the top 15. Back from there, Jordy Lopez Jr., Nicholas Shelton, the dominant driver from Phoenix, not having the great day he had in Phoenix here in virtual Miami, with Femi Olat, Justin Bolton, and Blake Reynolds rounding out the top 20.
Team Brotherton has moved into the first spot with Jake Nichols behind him. Anthony Burrows started this race in 29th. He's now in 23rd. Michael Cozy Jr. in the 24th position. Behind him is Zach Nichols. Ryan Doucette runs in 26th. Brian Mercurio in 27th. Brandon McKissick has made his way up to P28, the Floridian himself. Then Blade Witt and Garrett Lowe round out the top 30.
Daniel Everhart runs in the 31st position. 32nd belongs to Jake Matheson. Casey Tucker sits in the 33rd position, and 34th is where you'll find Chris Shearburn. Christian Peterson rides in 35th this time. 36th is where Seth DeMerchant is. Brad Davies currently runs 37th. 38th belongs to Ashton Crowder. Derek Justice and Brian Schoenberg complete our full 40-car field for this race as we cross the halfway point. And that concludes tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 90 laser scan tracks and cars to choose from, iRacing is your portal to the racing world. Get on track today at iRacing.com. At the front, Caden Honeycutt in control of this race. For the drivers who decided to make this a two-stop race, though, it is about to get very busy, and you're about to hear a tremendous amount of Justin Prince, because we're going to see a lot of cars come down pit road over the course of the next 10 laps, and these stops, Josh Lee, could be the ones that separate the winners from the folks running 10th, 20th, 30th, wherever.
If we don't see a late caution, this will end up being the money stop. We saw what that did for Kyle Larson on Sunday night at Phoenix. This isn't quite at that level. We're not fighting for a championship here, but we are fighting for a precious win that could mean the difference between the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series and the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying iRacing Series for 2022 for a couple of these drivers. Every position on the racetrack matters. Every finish will matter at the end of this campaign. What can these drivers do when they hit the pit lane? You're on board with Michael Cozy Jr. He's got a little bit more work to do from P24. If he wants to walk away with a good finish here, he can gain a couple of positions off of the pit stop. That's not going to gift him a top 10.
I was about to say, that does not necessarily look like a happy driver, given that he's running in the 24th position. That's not where you want to be if you have Coke Series aspirations next year. So Cozy's going to need to find a little bit of speed. In the meantime, though, we've hit lap 84, so if you are running these stints evenly, this is the lap that you are going to try and come in. However, we saw drivers come in a little bit later than I think initially anticipated. 85 or 45, 46, 47 laps seemed to be about the mean for most drivers who decided to two-stop this race. So it may be a few laps yet, maybe closer to lap 90 when we see drivers come in. But they are definitely going to make their way to pit road within the next few laps. So you get a good look on board Colin Bowden for Space Station Gaming. He's currently last man in the top 10, Devin.
Well, boys, this is the part of the race where I'm going to put my car to the wall right here and make a massive mistake on pit road personally, because we have ran 84 laps under green, now 50 to go. The mental fatigue that a race like this takes on you. I mean, we talked about restrictor plate tracks where you're in a group all the time, but the amount of patience and the amount of mental capacity it takes to keep this car running at your top level for the entire portion of the past 85 laps is so fatiguing. This is where if we get a green flag stop right now, being able to execute that perfectly is going to be a pain in the butt. And right now, when you got a guy like Derek Justice blowing by the field, and again, that mental fatigue is saying in, when you see someone come up with this much speed on you, it's so easy to make a mistake that can ruin your race.
Here's a good look at Derek Justice. That's the leader, Caden Honeycutt, that he just passed. Now, Justice scored 38th and just came down pit road and figures not to be a factor towards the top of the leaderboard if this goes green all the way. But you get a visual there. He is absolutely leaving Caden Honeycutt in the dust, and that is entirely because of the fresh tires he has underneath his Toyota Supra. That's the only reason why he's making that work as well as he is right now, as Cody Bias continues to poke around the rear bumper of Parker Retzlaff and try and find a way to get around him, whether or not it's inside or outside. But Bias would like to have second before they come down pit road.
On board with Colin Keister as he tries to chase down the front drivers. So what we're learning from the middle portion of this race is that Caden Honeycutt and Parker Retzlaff seem to be basically the two drivers this season that are to beat. Retzlaff with, of course, a win at Phoenix. Honeycutt finished P3, but both of those drivers were up front for the entire race and finished up front in that race from Phoenix. Cody Bias, a great run from him as he sits in P2. A bit of pressure from Retzlaff behind, but great to see Cody Bias up here trying to get back into the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Of course, a handful of seasons there. Had to work his way back through the qualifying series this season, was able to work his way through round 1 into round 2, and then right back into the Contender iRacing series. Hopefully he can work his way back into the Coke Series. He still has a long way to go, but a great second place finish here from Homestead. It's going to just jumpstart him, especially after a 9th place finish at Phoenix. It'll keep him above the cut line.
We talked a little bit about Donovan Strauss's redemption arc from last year on the first week broadcast in Phoenix. I want to touch on Cody Bias's as well as we get a look at Donovan Strauss. But Bias was in position to qualify 2 years ago in the Contender Series and dominated the 3rd race of the season at Richmond, and then came down pit road, got trapped at about 20th under a late race screen or yellow flag, got wrecked, finished about 25th after leading a solid half of that race. And that difference in points ultimately was the difference between him making it the Coke Series and him having to go through the qualifying series and racing his way all the way back through. So you know he wants to get back into the madness, and you know he wants another crack at the Coke Series. And I think he's a little bit more determined after that whole experience, even though it's been maybe a year and a half plus. He doesn't forget, as we finally have drivers on pit road, and that means it is time to go down to Justin Prince.
Thank you very much, James. And off the pit lane go several drivers, amongst them Blake McCandless. He's been very calm on the radio for the most part throughout this race tonight, to the point where Isaac Gann actually accomplished and rather complimented him on how calm he had been. McCandless responded with how he didn't feel calm. However, the car feels all right. They had been reporting over the radio. Michael Cozy Jr. has been asking for the past few laps for several adjustments on the 99 machine after some of the problems. It's been an intriguing night for that machine so far. As well for Colin Keister, very calm in the cockpit for the number 8 machine as well. Those are among some of the drivers who've opened up the pit window, but more calls are coming this time by from the lead pack, including Cody Bias, who had been told to try and get as close as possible to Caden Honeycutt prior to this pit stop. They've been pretty calm over the radio as well. As well, Colin Bowden, who was amongst those who just dunked into the pit lane this time, reported he had been getting a little bit loose in the midst of the pack prior to that pit stop.
4 drivers in for service, and we'll wait, maybe give Justin a breather here for about a half lap. We would expect Honeycutt, Retzlaff, Strauss, LaPrade, and company to potentially be in this time, and it looks like everybody's coming in, including Caden Honeycutt. Race leader is down pit road, as is Donovan Strauss. Justin.
Matching the times up towards that pit entry, Caden Honeycutt had mentioned very minor adjustments. One, for the most part, had felt fairly comfortable up in the clean air for a majority of that run. Donovan Strauss, along with his technical alliance owner in Boyd Hogan, have been feeling very confident in the cockpit. They had been chilling, as Boyd Hogan would say, in that machine. More drivers continue to roll on in. Malik Ray had also asked for several adjustments after his run. He had been able to pick up 5 spots from his starting position prior to pit stops. More also coming in this time by. Keep an eye on the number 42 of Parker Retzlaff. At the start of the last run, James, he had mentioned how he felt he could beat Caden Honeycutt on entry. He felt he was much quicker on the way he could enter the pit lane. So keep that in mind for how the 42 and the 10 cycle out.
Also, I have Dylan on, I believe, and a few others that are working their way to pit road. Have already come down pit road. Santi Tires is on pit road at this time, and we'll see whether or not Parker Retzlaff is able to beat Caden Honeycutt off of pit road. And as it stands, here comes Retzlaff off into turn 1 now. Honeycutt just entering the corner. This is going to be very tight, but there's the move. So Honeycutt is going to be clear of Retzlaff. Retzlaff is going to have fresher tires by a lap, but he's also going to have somewhere in the ballpark of, call it maybe, what, 3 seconds he'll have to make up on Honeycutt in order to get to the dominant car of the middle of this race and potentially get after the race win. Here's a look at Seth the Merchant further back in the field, trying to race with his teammate Christian Peterson down in New Canaan, Connecticut. There goes Peterson to the inside and makes the pass to jump up another spot. That'll put Peterson a little bit further up the running order, but as it stands, tough night for Peterson. He's not had a lot of speed and currently running dead last in the 40th position on the racetrack. Just came down for service 6 laps ago.
and Seth DeMerchant, one of the drivers who has not come in on this cycle, James. Him and Shearburn, now the only drivers left in this top 5 who are on that alternate strategy. You can throw Derek Justice into that mix, but he pitted 20 laps ago, so he's also looking a little bit frazzled there in P5, trying to hold on to that top 5 spot, as Colin Keister currently holds the provisional top spot after pitting 5 laps ago. 2 lap fresher tires for Caden Honeycutt, but he does have to get through Cody Bias and Alan Bowes before he gets up to Colin Keister, who currently runs in P6. Bias going to pass Brad Davies, who is another one of those drivers on the alternate strategy, 40 laps on those tires.
Here's Jake Matheson running out of the northeast. Devin Henry, you got more.
No, I just feel like right now it's make your bedtime, right? You're done. If you have not pitted yet, this is your strategy. You need a caution here to win this race. For all these guys up front who have not pitted yet, there's no need to pit anymore. You are banking on a caution at this point, because with how much time that you are losing to these leading cars, you're losing almost a second and a half per lap. This is it. This is the strategy call right now. These drivers up front need a caution to get themselves a solid finish tonight.
We also know that the fuel numbers are pretty much dead on, 59 to 62 laps. Furthest we saw someone go was Chris Shearburn. He went 60 laps on the opening stint. And Shearburn, not surprisingly, pacing this field. He then, in theory, has 20 more laps left on this run to potentially sit out front and either pit from the lead or near it if we get a yellow flag.
Yeah, right now, like Devin Henry said, top 5, they're basically hoping for a caution. Derek Justice might be in a little bit of a different boat because he still needs to pit one more time. I don't think he can make it to the end, and if he can, he is going to be on very much older tires, especially considering the fact that the tire difference between himself and Colin Keister is about 15 laps, and Keister is now about a second and a half behind the 31 of Derek Justice. So that strategy did not work for the 31. Shearburn up front, able to hold a little bit of speed. Same thing with DeMerchant, same thing with Witt and Matheson. Matheson's in the worst spot right now, 58 lap old tires. This is really right now just a lot of praying for a yellow flag from the drivers at the front, and a lot of praying this race goes green to the end for basically Keister on back. But what a strategy from Colin Keister as he currently leads the way provisionally. The dominant driver of the race is creeping up, however, about a second and a half separating those drivers now on the racetrack.
Colin Keister is the first driver who came out amongst the ones who came in on that 2-stop cycle, so he's got the track position. But you're right, Caden Honeycutt is faster, and is faster by about 0.3 of a second. The gap between Honeycutt and Keister, as it stands, about 1.4 seconds. That's the number that Honeycutt needs to make up over the course of the next 33 laps in order to potentially get the race win if this goes green the rest of the way. Lots of questions still to ask here, lots of answers we need to figure out, but for Honeycutt, that's the simple math. Go chase down Keister, and by extension, Bias and Justice, who are right in front of him, and see if you can go win this race.
But if I'm Keister, I'm pretty happy with that North 4 Chevy Camaro, because this is the only guy in the field who was really towards the middle of the field, I don't want to say the back, who has worked his way up periodically throughout the race and has kept himself there around that top 5 of cars who are on the same pit strategy. He started this race 18th and has just really sat in the top 5 for the final half of this race. That number 8 team has picked the right set of moves after starting mid-pack, and whether it's a win or not a win, the points that he's going to accumulate today after not a poor qualifying effort, but not where you want to be at a track like Homestead-Miami Speedway, this has got to be, at least to an extent after qualifying, a win for that camp. And then again, if some circumstances go right, I mean, Derek Justice might be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and have him not a bad finish either after starting this race in 15th. But I've been impressed by Keister in that number 8 camp today, and we'll see how much more he can keep up this good run.
Good look here at Dylan Alt, who now rides in the 12th position, trying to work his way back up towards the front and go chase down Parker Retzlaff as Jake Matheson comes down pit road for service, so that'll end his bid. It's now down to Chris Shearburn and Seth DeMerchant. Those are the final 2 staying out on the racetrack, hoping that the yellow flag comes in to completely flip their race strategy.
So that's Shearburn and DeMerchant that right now at the front are just praying for a caution. Colin Keister is in a bit of an interesting situation because he has 1 lap older tires than Cody Bias, 2 lap older tires than Honeycutt and Strauss. You go back from there, he's basically on some of the best tires at the front. He gets by Seth DeMerchant, that moves him into second place. That's going to essentially put a slower car towards Cody Bias for him to try and work himself by. If we don't see a yellow flag to the end here, James, I would argue that Colin Keister might be in the best situation to win this race. He's at the front, only about a lap or 2 laps separating his tires and the drivers around him. We could be looking at another Colin Keister win here in the 8 machine and his first win of the Contender Series.
And a few wins in the qualifying series as well. And as we go on board with Caden Honeycutt, we have updates on the drive out of Texas from Justin Prince.
And keep in mind, it was just a couple laps ago, you may have noticed there was near contact with Matheson coming in towards the pit lane. He was not happy over the in-game radio as well as his own radio. The first response from Vicente Salas, who is on the box room for tonight's action, is to focus on Bias. Focus in front of what's in front of you for the rest of this respective run to try and reel them on in. Things are getting pretty tight amongst those competitors, keep in mind, as they now make the way around Shearburn as he loses the lead after trying to stretch it on the fuel runs.
And Chris Shearburn maintained some semblance of track position. The leaders have already passed him, so he's not going to come down from the lead. He's got about 12 laps left in his bid to get a yellow flag. If we don't get one in that stretch, then he will come down pit road and lose all the track position and likely be relegated to a finish somewhere in the back half of the 30s. So Shearburn really could use a yellow. Donovan Strauss, on the other hand, I think would love to race this out a little bit more because he's had speed and currently runs in the top 5.
Great onboard shot we're getting with Donovan Strauss, and had such a great run through the qualifying series like we've mentioned so many times here, James, and a relatively good start into the Contender Series at the beginning of the race in Phoenix. Definitely not how he wanted to end it in P34. So he's outside of the cut line. A P4 finish here at Homestead will do him really well, especially with the drop weeks coming up. I think he'll want to use that 34th place as a drop, which would mean that in all of the races leading up to the final race of his campaign, he will need to finish above 34th place. So the points will forget about that race in Phoenix.
Good to have points that don't have a long memory if you get the drops to fall your way and everything pans out right with the races you do get to count. Meanwhile, we can't update you and tell you that we have our first retiree of the evening inside of 25 laps to go. Brian Schoenberg has pulled his car behind the wall. He will finish 40th and last in the field this evening. And that's a tough break. Schoenberg just didn't have a lot of speed and could be at a crossroads. We talked to him on multiple occasions throughout the year, and he said that depending on how this series goes, if he gets back into the Coke Series, then he'll give it another go, but he may end up hanging it up for a long while if he fails to qualify for the 2022 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. So we may be witnessing the final few races of Brian Schoenberg's sim racing career as we know it, depending on how this series goes for him. And we'll watch that over the course of the next few weeks as we continue to watch this fight here between Cody Bias and Jake Matheson, who's a lap down but on the fresher tires. Meanwhile, the battle just behind this group, Caden Honeycutt and Donovan Strauss. That is for position as Strauss goes underneath Honeycutt. Will try and take away third.
And I was looking at lap times in this top 5, and I was going, who's the fastest car on track right now? Believe it or not, it's 15th place. Santiago Tires has been the fastest car on track, I believe, the past 4 straight laps. So he's trying to grab himself some positions before this race is said and done. And in fact, Chris Shearburn was just passed by Tires. So Shearburn has the anchor out on that number 36 machine. But when I was looking up front, Strauss has consistently been the fastest car of that top 5 grouping, or top 4 battle, I should say. But Keister's done a great job maintaining a 1-second gap on Bias and Strauss and Honeycutt. So even though Keister's pit cycle was a little bit different than everyone else, he's still maintaining really quality lap times, even if not faster than the rest of that top 4 grouping. So if he's able to maintain this 1-second advantage, he's putting himself in great position for what will be 20 to go next time by.
How tight does this get at the front end? How can they run down Colin Keister? What can they do potentially to make the difference and make things happen at the very front end of this field? It's a great battle there between Caden Honeycutt and now Alan Bose, as Honeycutt's car does not look as strong as it did in the second run, and it almost appears that maybe Donovan Strauss might have the best car amongst the drivers in the top 5, or maybe even Alan Bose, who's got one lap older tires than Honeycutt, but right there on pace.
Keister continues to run away here at the front. It's about a 1.1 second gap between himself and Cody Bias. Bias has had speed all night, but the driver who really has been setting this race on fire, Caden Honeycutt, sits 4th. Parker Retzlaff sits 6th. They've both been the main 2 drivers of this race, but Keister now at the front. Gonna need to get that defense out, because I think Cody Bias is going to catch him here soon, especially if he doesn't get a ton of pressure from Donovan Strauss behind. But this ending of this race, James, is going to get interesting, because Keister out in front. This run will be the first time in this entire race that he is out in front. Bias and Strauss might have an opportunity to take it, and if Honeycutt can come alive, he might have an opportunity as well, but they're going side by side for P4. Alan Bose is going to take that spot.
The Bose continuing to make his charge, now clear of Honeycutt, who continues to fade. Parker Retzlaff is next in line. Donovan Strauss, meanwhile, is starting to eat into the gap that Cody Bias had. It's now 0.2 of a second between Strauss and Bias, and this would be for the runner-up spot. So I think we're trying to figure out who's going to try and climb the mountain, and which one of these 4 is going to be the one to make it to the top and try and challenge Keister for the race win.
And I gotta believe that someone somewhere is keeping a little bit of conservation on that right front tire, taking it chill, and will want to run someone down. The only issue here is you're not going to necessarily gain a ton of time, even on some tire saving, like a 1.5 or a 1 1/10 lead over Keister between Bias. Strauss, though, just about 0.2 behind, but Bose saw some make up 0.8 of a second on Donovan Strauss. So with how popped out these guys are, it's going to be quite a trek for Bose to catch back up to Strauss. And Bias still feels like a world away from Colin Keister. He's been stuck at a second for like the last 15 laps, but Strauss certainly has an opportunity here to close in on Bias, use up that rear bumper, and make his way around him for that runner-up spot. This is where you have to decide, okay, do I need to run this person down right now, or do I need to save a little bit more and then blitz that final 10 laps and get every point that I can? Remember, guys, it's only a 7-race series, and I know that we've been talking about drop weeks, but if you're a driver in the series, you're not even thinking about a drop week right now, week number 2. You are thinking, I need every single point that I can get with no stage racing and only one drop week and 7 races in the season. You want every single point that you can get, and that includes right now at Homestead.
All these points matter. We've seen that very clearly. Blake McCandless is this year's example of that. Needed every last bit of his late season charge of the qualifying series to make it into the Contender series, and now he's not going to have a bad run here tonight. 15th on the board as it stands, and trying to wrest away the 14th spot from Jordy Lopez Jr., but he'll take this after the way things were panning out last week at Phoenix. Got caught up in a late race wreck, did not have the start that he wanted. This might not be exactly what he was looking for, but this is better. This is definitely better.
It's uphill for Blake McCandless, which for round number 2, I think it's all you can really ask for the drivers that are underneath that cut line, because right now, McCandless sits in P26 in the points coming into tonight, and we'll see with the drop week starting to be counted where he is going to be in round number 3 of the campaign at Auto Club. But great to see just the positivity from Blake McCandless and working his way further up the field to P15 in the top 15. Definitely nothing to scoff at for McCandless, especially trying to make that run for the Coca-Cola iRacing Series coming in from the Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series. A great start to the season. Just needs to continue that, keep on going uphill, and we'll see McCandless into the Coke Series in 2022.
Consistency above everything. That, I think, is the most important thing. The simple fact of the matter is that if you can finish top 20 all 6 weeks or 7 weeks, you're going to go Coke Series racing in 2022. The bar isn't necessarily high, but we've seen drivers' aggression vary depending on where they sit on that side of the cut line, and the variations in how they run. That ends up making the difference more often than not as to whether these drivers end up racing in the Coke Series or have to go back through the qualifying series for another year.
And Justin Prince was reporting pre-race that Brink McCandless was just jubilant to start this race in the 12th position in qualifying. So it's something where I think attitude has a large part to play in such a short stint, like a 7-week series here in the Contender Series. And this is a very cutthroat kind of industry, right, when it comes to iRacing and professional sim racing. And you know, you got to be the top 20 in points, and sometimes being even the underdog, being one of those 20 guys to come through the qualifying series, you feel like you have less pressure, and then you just go out and you just convert spots, convert points, and oh, hey, like you said, James, all I got to do is finish top 20 every week. Now, you don't want to go top 20 every week leading to the final race, and then you're on the cut line. I'd much rather finish, I don't know, top 15, top 10, maybe top 5 every race, like some of these guys did in the qualifying series, but all you got to do is have that consistency to advance, to compete for that massive potential payday in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series. And that's all you need, is to have that chance. And right now, a lot of these guys are just putting themselves in position to have that chance after 2 weeks.
What is it? Shall we say the road to $300,000 or something to that effect? Yeah? I think we've heard that line a few times from Evan Pasoko, and that's the promised land that these drivers are chasing after. But the driver they are chasing after in this race still is Colin Keister. Now inside of 10 laps to go, and Cody Bias has been a little bit quicker than Keister the last few laps, and still is. Got a 10th off of Keister the last time by. The problem is that he's got 8 tenths he needs to make up in a 9-lap span. He's got to clip off at least a 10th a lap and then make the pass as well.
Just what a strategy from Keister to get up to this point. Yeah, been running great all night. We've seen him close to the front all night. We saw him close to the front in Phoenix as well. Coming into this race, 4th in the point standings. 3 wins in the qualifying series at Richmond, at Rockingham, and Texas. Rockingham and Texas, 2 back-to-back wins in a row as well. A great run from him here tonight at Homestead. They got that car to the front on that 2nd green flag pit stop of the night, and he has been unbeatable since. Now, Bias has been able to make up a little bit of time in the last 20 laps, only making up 4 tenths. Like you mentioned, James, has nothing to make up on the racetrack. Bias needs to start throwing everything in the kitchen sink and even more at Colin Keister to try and get around him. He's just not close enough right now. He might be seeing a bit of pressure behind from a driver on fresher tires. That looks to be Chris Shearburn looking to work his way around.
A reminder that if you log on to iRacing.com, you can pick up a 25% off renewal or 50% off a new account sign up as part of the Black Friday sale. This is the best time to renew your account. Renewals are cheaper during this sale over the course of the month of November than any other time during the year. So if you're going to re-up your iRacing account, this is the time to do it. And you can head to iRacing.com/Black Friday if you want to re-up your account today. Bias still trying to chase down Colin Keister, and he's still faster, but this last time by it was only by 100. He still needs more, and does this not feel maybe just a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I mean a lot, like Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards in 2011, Devin Henry, where Stewart had pace and Edwards was a little bit faster, but towards the end of the race, as the tire differences leveled off, Edwards did not find the speed to get around Stewart. And Stewart won his 3rd career title on a tiebreaker. Could Keister win this first race of the the Contender Series for his 2021 campaign if this all pans out the same way over the course of the final 5 laps?
And Stewart, the inaugural victor of the first Cup Series race here at Homestead-Miami Speedway way back when as well. So that's quite the comparison that you make there. And this is where, okay, coming to 4 laps to go, we are upping the intensity. And there was just a 3-car battle for 10th between Briar LaProud, Malik Ray. And we were talking about Santiago Tirez earlier. Tirez has now made his way to the 11th position. I talked about it earlier, like a few laps ago. Hey, you need to pick up every spot that you can. Last time we checked out T-Rex, he was like 15th, 16th on track. Now there's an opportunity for him to get a top 10 out of this race here at Homestead. I know that we talked a lot about Keister and how his strategy has taken him from 18th to 1st. A great job for them. But T-Rex is someone who started in 22nd tonight and might be able to get a top 10 out of this potentially fully green race.
A very nice run for Santiago Gutierrez. If this holds true, you can make the same argument for Malik Ray as well, who came up from 16th to 12th. Nice little gain on his end, but no question that Gutierrez and Blake Reynolds have been the hardest chargers of this race, along with Garrett Lowe, who started in 39th up to 23rd by race's end. But they are all chasing Colin Keister, and he has now stretched it out on Cody Bias. It's up to 1.1 seconds, so this is all about the clean air and all about Keister just clipping off these last few laps before he picks up win number 1 in Contender Series 2021.
And Bias with absolutely nothing to work with Colin Keister. He's sitting in second, good speed all night long, but he hasn't been in the lead too much tonight, James, so it does look like Bias is only going to have a second place car. And Colin Keister got the car put up to the front, and what a way to run in the second round of the Contender Series campaign. Keister with 3 wins in the qualifying series. He's used to victory lane here, James.
3 wins in the qualifying series, 1 career victory in the Coach Series. That was at Charlotte last year. Looking for a win in the Contender Series to round it all off. White flag here for Colin Keister. 1 more lap to go for him at Homestead-Miami.
When we talk about having consistency, just needing to put races together, you can finish top 20 every race however much you want, but it's nights like tonight. The entire team mentality working out together to get yourself up front, and Keister from 18th to 1st. What a night to potentially bring home this victory.
He and Retzlaff, as it stands, will be tied, I believe, at the top of the points leaderboard if this holds. But it's the man out of Frostburg, Maryland, who had an excellent final pit stop, got the clean air, and will wiggle across the line of victory in South Florida. Colin Keister is your winner of the second race of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series season from Homestead-Miami Speedway, and they had nothing for him on the final green flag run.
What a final green flag run that was for him, James. He got up to the front off of the pit stop and then had the car to keep it up there. He qualified back in 18th. We didn't think the 8 car would have the speed. Once he got up there, got in that clean air, absolutely nothing anybody could have done to stop Colin Keister and the Frostburg, Maryland driver winning way down in South Florida.
He will burn it down across the start-finish line and try and see what he wants to do so far as the burnout goes. There it is, launching off, and now we see the donuts across start-finish for Colin Keister, who celebrates his victory and celebrates a place atop the point standings as well. He'll go there with Parker Retzlaff, who won last week and finishes 4th this week. Keister, the reverse, finished 4th at Phoenix. Comes on the winner at Homestead-Miami Speedway by 1.2 seconds over Cody Bias. Donovan Strauss finished in the 3rd spot. We'll talk to all 3 of them in just a moment. Parker Retzlaff finished in the 4th position. 5th went to Alan Bowes. Caden Honeycutt came home in the 6th spot. 7th went to Kyle Peddle. Dylan Alt finished in 8th. 9th went to Brian LaProud. And Santiago Gutierrez completed the top 10. Josh.
Down from there, P11 goes to Malik Ray with Colin Bowden in P12. Taylor Hurst, Jordy Lopez Jr., Blake McCandless ends up with a P15. Blake's best finish of the season so far. Nicholas Shelton, another mid-pack finish for him after a dominating performance at Phoenix, with Derek Bordeaux, Femi Olap, Blake Reynolds, and Jake Nichols rounding out the top 20.
Maybe not the best finishes, but some great recoveries for guys like Ryan Doucette, started 33rd, finishes 21st. Anthony Burrows started 29th. How about Garrett Lowe, started almost shotgun on the field, 39th, brings it home in 23rd. Zach Nichols started 36th, brings it home in 24th. Brian Mercurio has to sell for a 25th position. McKissick in 26th. Justin Bolton in 27th. Liam Brotherton 28th. Derek Justice and Michael Cozy Jr. round out the top 30.
31st this evening was Daniel Eberhard, finished in 32nd. Christian Peterson came home 33rd, and 34th went to Jake Matheson. Casey Tucker was 35th this evening. 36 was Carr, 36 Chris Sherburne. Seth the Merchant finished in 37th. 38 was Ashton Crowder. Brad Davies and Brian Schoenberg complete the 40-car field. Time for us to turn our attention to the race winner out of Maryland. Let's see if we can get a word with Colin Kaister, who comes home with the race win with the provisional points lead. And Colin, just that last stop, take us through your run there and how you found all the speed coming down pit road, because it seemed like it was the lane time of the box time that got you the track position you needed to finish this off.
Yeah, I decided to pit a lap earlier than everybody there to try to get a jump on them, and I just sent it into pit road and it stuck, and I was able to get a pretty good pit stop there and get out and clean track and just put some good laps down. Those guys come out a little bit behind me, and I was able to save a little tire while they were trying to catch up, and that really helped me out there at the end. I was able to keep the rear tires on it.
You got an intriguing arc this season. You were in the Coke Series in 2020 and then got bounced from the Contender Series last year. You had to spend the season going through qualifying series, now to the Contender Series, you back where you were a year ago. What have you learned from that experience, and what from that have you carried into this year's Contender Series campaign?
I've just learned to have a little bit more patience and not make evasive moves all the time and just let it come to me, and that's really helped me a lot. I've been able to be a lot more consistent and keep the car clean as well.
After running so well on long green flag runs at a place like Homestead-Miami, are you excited to go to Auto Club next week, where a lot of the same tire saving strategies you're going to need to employ in order to be well? You do it here, you figure you can do it well there too?
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the season, but yeah, I'm looking forward to Auto Club next week too. We should have a pretty good setup again, I would think, and good long run pace. Just got to keep the tires on it myself and not overdrive, and we should be pretty sporty there too.
Well, Colin, congratulations on your first victory of this Contender Series season. Thanks as always for the time. We'll see you in Southern California 1 week from tonight.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Colin Kaister brings home his Chevy Camaro P1. P2 this evening was actually, we're going to go to P3. We're going to go to Donovan Strauss, who is with Josh Lee.
Well, Donovan, a great run for you tonight, and definitely a little bit better than it was for you in Phoenix. How was that number 51 feeling out there on the track?
Oh, you don't know. Nobody knows how big of a reliever this is, dude. Like, I've been like all last year and last week, I felt like you don't want to ever like have that mentality. Like the same thing is going to happen all over again. But when I got taken out last week, I was like, oh, here we go, all over again. And I had to get over it and just put my head towards this week and worked hard, worked really hard. I think I turned like around 600 laps for this race, and the car was really good. I don't think we had something for Colin, but I think I was the same pace as Cody. I just ran my tires off the last run trying to get to him, but man, I'm so relieved right now. This is insane.
You talk about the relief and coming off of the finish you had at Phoenix. Of course, definitely can see that relief from you with a 34th place finish in Phoenix. Coming from the domination of the qualifying series and being the qualifying series champion, being at the top of the point standings when we began the Contender Series, did Phoenix really put you into a bad mind space that you had to try and overcome here for Homestead?
Oh yeah, 100%. I always have I always overthink a lot, and when I always like to start off the first race really good, whether it's in Road to Pro or in the Contender Series or anything. I like to start off the first race good because I feel like that sets you up for the rest of the season mentally, and that put me in a bad spot. But last year the same thing happened. I just sat here and I worried about it till the race, and I had to get over it and put my head forward, put my head down, and get after it this week, because obviously with the races only being 1 week apart and not two like Road to Pro, you don't got you don't got breaks at all. You just got to get right back to doing what you're doing, and the good finishes will come eventually, and finally we got one.
Well, Donovan, it was a great run for you tonight moving forward to the Auto Club Speedway. Do you think you can bring similar speed to Homestead, or do you think it's going to be another week of a lot of practice hours and trying to get the car into a better state for that race?
I mean, we'll have to put a lot of time into it, but I don't see why we can't back this up for the rest of the year. I mean, we had the pace last week. I went from 35th to 7th or whatever it was. Like, I don't see why we can't just keep this up, and just gotta keep it going, race smart, and those finishers will come. And finally we got one tonight. I've worried about the same, like I said, I've worried about the same bad luck coming in this series since last year. Going into this year, I worried about it, wondering if it was going to happen again, and it didn't. But I want to say thank you to everyone at Space Station Gaming, Seal Series champion, everyone for giving me this opportunity to represent them in the Contender Series. I've always wanted to be a part of a gaming organization, and finally got that chance. And can't thank Jake Fisher and Will Rogers and everybody enough. Can't thank everyone at Legacy for all the help. Boyd, JD for being on the box, Vicente, everybody.
Thanks for joining us post-race, Donovan. Congratulations on your third place finish here from Virtual Homestead. We'll see you in 1 week's time in Virtual Fontana.
Thank you, Josh.
Great to hear from Marietta, Georgia's Donovan Strauss. James, a great finish for him off of a bit of a lackluster run for him in Phoenix.
Cody Bias was runner-up this evening. Let's see if we can get a word with him, courtesy of our man, Devin Henry.
Cody Bice bringing it home in the second place position after top 10 run in the opening week at Phoenix. But Cody, when you look at what you were able to do tonight, you qualify inside of the top 5. You run inside the top 5 of at least your pit cycle for the most part. What else did you need there to track back down Colin Keister at the end of this race?
Probably just needing clean air, to be honest with you guys. I thought we had a really, really good long run card tonight, and it was evident at the end of every run we'd catch Kate in there at the end. We just never got the lead. Like I said, the car was really good. Thanks to everybody at Dead Zone Racing for such a great piece, and we just came up a little bit short tonight.
Hot track, a little bit of freight train racing, if you will, but somehow, some way, you kept basically everyone behind you. What was your strengths here tonight to keep that 27 machine out front and at least give yourself a chance to land up here on the podium?
Yeah, really, it all, I guess, comes back to about a few years ago where I just started running this track a little bit different. And with how I run this place, it's been really beneficial over the run, especially on my rear tires. And tonight we were slipping and sliding. The car wasn't easy to drive, but we were able to hang on a little bit longer than most. And like I said, stay up towards the front all night. And like I said, it was a blast racing everybody. And I'm glad to be talking to you guys again.
Of course, glad to see you come home in second. Cody Bias, your second place finisher tonight here at Homestead-Miami Speedway. Congrats, Cody.
Thanks, guys.
Cody Bias comes home P2. That completes our podium interviews. And as we said, just looking at the quick math here with the drops, Parker Retzlaff, Colin Keister, dead even on points. 1 win, 1 fourth place finish. So those two lead the point standings heading into Auto Club next week, where it should be more of the same. You wonder, though, whether or not it's going to be more of the inside lane at Auto Club, maybe more so than we saw here tonight, because Auto Club's even wider than this track at Homestead-Miami. This place didn't really bring us an outside line like we thought it might.
We saw a little bit of stragglers go up there, especially at the beginning of that first run, right as the green flag dropped. But since then, it was a lot of freight training on the bottom, and that's to be expected, of course. In this series, a lot of drivers are looking for that consistency. If they were running up at the top of the racetrack, those tires were being burned off, going to lead to them being slower and finishing down the order. So I expected a little bit, but I definitely think at Auto Club we're going to see a little bit more of that multi-groove happen, because they can use a little bit more of that multi-groove without sacrificing that tires.
And you make multiple grooves work. If you had a good run tonight, Devin, it's going to bear very well, I would think, for what we're going to see at Auto Club in 1 week's time. Same sort of skill set, similar sort of way you have to drive the racetrack, and potentially similar kind of racing when we go back to it next Tuesday night, November 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern on iRacing social media channels, the Twitch, the Facebook, and YouTube, all in play.
And I specifically look at guys like Parker Retzlaff, Caden Honeycutt, Colin Keister, Cody Bias, they have all had great opening races to open up this Contender Series. And after all of them also running well tonight, you look at Auto Club and you are thinking, if I can just get 3 top 10 finishes to open up this series, I'm going to feel so much more comfortable heading to some of the less intermediate-like tracks, like the Nashville track, like the Dover, like the Darlington, before we finally get back to an intermediate at Texas. We talked about already how short this season is. Opening up the year with 3 really strong finishes make you oh so comfortable that you can finish top 20 in points here and get yourself into the eNASCAR iRacing Coca-Cola Series.
The road to $300,000 continues next week, but before we go racing in Auto Club, a few events to tell you about in the world of iRacing taking place over the course of the next 7 days. Tomorrow, we've got the IRX Rallycross World Championship presented by Yokohama. Their penultimate race from Sonoma Raceway will come your way 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. GMT on the iRacing Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. Same story for the Force Dynamics Solara iRacing Grand Prix Championship from Suzuka. That'll come your way Thursday, November 11th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time in the afternoon, 7 p.m. if you're over in Europe. iRacing's Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, the place to be for that broadcast before we are back with race number 3 of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from Auto Club Speedway, Tuesday night, November 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be available on iRacing's Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels, as well as the Podium 2 Twitch channel. It is time to say good night from Homestead-Miami, but before we do, plenty of thank yous we need to give. Tyler Hudson, Drew Adamson, Sean Ambrose, Cisco Scaramuza, and Corey Vervinstead iRacing for all they do to help orchestrate this eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. For Gary Sexton and John Theodore, behind the scenes at Podium Esports. For our producer this evening, Ryan Bauer, our camera builder, Dougie Beard, Justin Prince, giving us all the reports down on pit road, and for Joshua Lee and Devin Henry with me in the booth, I am James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports. Thank you so much for watching Podium Esports broadcast this evening, and we'll see you next Tuesday night for round number 3 of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from the Virtual Auto Club Speedway. Congratulations to Colin Keister, a winner in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series for 2021.